You're watching Africa Live. Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Penina Karibe. In Nairobi, also coming up this half hour. Troubled township clashes erupt after residents demand local authority to be dissolved. And brothers keeper, why Zimbabwe is ready to deploy troops to Mozambique. But counting is underway for Madagascar's crunch elections aimed at ending a 4-year-long political crisis. The Malagasy people went to the polls on Friday to choose between 33 presidential hopefuls in the first round. A credible and transparent election could see the return of investors and donor funding, critical to Madagascar's economic and social recovery. Partial results have begun trickling in from across the country, but the Independent National Election Commission has 10 days from the vote to declare the provisional result. For more on that, I'm now joined by Clementine Logan live from the capital, Antananarivo. Clem, what's the latest there? Do we have any idea yet who's leading the first round?
Well, Penina, teams here at the Independent National Election Commission have been on constant rotation since Friday night as they continue to count and verify those votes coming in from across the country electronically. Now, there are no exit polls to help us predict exactly what might happen, but what we do know from the votes that have come in so far is that Dr. Jean-Louis Robinson is faring well with around 23%. Now, he's the official candidate of ousted President Marc Ravalomanana and his wife Lelau, who he's pledged already to make Prime Minister if elected. Now, he's also Minister of Sports and Health, and he commands a pretty strong support base. I went to his last major rally in the capital earlier this week where he was addressing huge crowds. Now, things on the other side, slightly murkier. It's not yet clear who among those several candidates who appear to have the backing of transitional President Andry Rajoelina might be leading the first round. But from what we've seen so far, a favourite tip to make it is Eri Rajanaramanpianina, a former finance minister, and so we'll be watching that one closely. Now, it's important to remember that there's a lot at stake for these elections. It's important that these are deemed credible and transparent for Madagascar. And there have been some concerns raised over voters not finding their names on the electoral register and a relatively low turnout, but observers say this will improve in the second round set for December. Now, late last night, the Election Commission held a brief meeting, and I think we can take a listen now to what a couple of those present had to say.
Generally speaking, everything went well and calmly, apart from certain imperfections we've noted, but everything was well managed by those manning the polling stations and the security forces.
It's not the first time that the armed forces have secured the electoral process. We've been doing it since the 1960s, and our know-how has been confirmed by the good results we've seen, even if we're in a state of crisis. We've been preparing these elections for 1 year with the Electoral Commission. We've been able to ensure it is a secure one before and during the vote.
Well, yesterday, UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon praised Madagascar's efforts to return to constitutional order and said he hoped that polling would be followed by the orderly tallying of the results. But it could be more than a week before that result's clear. The Senate has 10 days to announce that provisional result. And from what I've heard today, they've only gotten through votes from around 150 of the 20,000 polling stations across the country. Penina.
So it's definitely going to be quite a long wait there. Clementine Logan joining us live from Antananarivo. Thanks very much for those insights. Well, let's move to the Democratic Republic of Congo now, where the United Nations mission says it is assessing the situation after heavy fighting broke out. M23 rebels and government troops engaged each other in eastern DRC after nearly 2 months of an easy calm. The clash comes days after peace talks broke down in the Ugandan capital Kampala. ACCTV's Maria Galang with more.
For the first time in nearly 2 months, the sound of gunfire is heard near the eastern city of Goma.
M23 rebels clashed with DR Congo government troops on Friday, both sides claiming the other began the assault. This renewed fighting comes just days after peace talks stalled between the two camps. Neighboring Rwanda claims yet again that Congolese army shells had landed on its territory. South African and Tanzanian troops, part of a new UN intervention brigade with a tough mandate to crush armed groups, were present near the front line but did not join the combat. The United Nations mission in Congo said it was reviewing the situation on the ground before deciding whether to help the Congolese army in its operations against the rebels. After the breakdown of the Kampala talks this week, the Congolese government said it had rejected the demands of the rebel movement for an amnesty for its leaders and its reintegration into the army. M23 says it has no desire to rejoin the Congolese forces, but insisted on amnesty for its leadership. In response, Congolese President Joseph Kabila threatened military force. It is the second time in 3 months that peace talks have faltered and combat has broken out, with the deadline to a resolution having come and passed. Peace in the eastern DRC remains uncertain. Maria Galang, CCTV.
Let's get another perspective of this story. And CCTV's Isabel Nakiria has more details, including reactions from the Ugandan capital, Kampala.
The M23 rebel delegation in Kampala says its troops were attacked by government forces Friday morning.
This morning at 3 o'clock local time, the Congolese government, with coalition of FDLR and other negative force pro-Congolese government, has attacked our positions down Kibati to Kibumba axis. This morning, 3 o'clock local times.
The rebel group accuses the DRC government of provoking the violence in a bid to derail talks, claims denied by a DRC army spokesperson who insisted M23 fired the first shots. The rebel group claims not to have fought back initially, but now says they are under instructions to take the war to the government troops.
Right now, at the moment I'm talking to you, our army, Revolutionary Congolese Army, is ready, is defending the position of what we have to save lives against those attacks from the Congolese government and its coalition of FDLR and other people.
The clashes come days after talks in Kampala collapsed following disagreements by both parties over amnesty to top M23 commanders and integration into the military ranks. It's the second attack in less than 2 weeks. DRC President Joseph Kabila recently announced plans for the government of national unity and the return of deposed former President Mobutu Sese Seko's remains from Morocco for burial back home. Will these overtures entice the rebels? Isabel Nakiria, CCTV, Kampala.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a break. Coming up. Troubled township clashes erupt after residents demand local authority to be dissolved.
The abduction of Libya's Prime Minister Ali Zaidan laid bare a deadly struggle within that country's fragile government. This week, Talk Africa probes Libya's emerging militia problem and explains why Africa cannot afford to look the other way.
A heavy police presence has been deployed in the troubled townships of Bekkersdal and Simunye, west of Johannesburg in South Africa. This follows violent protests in the area during the past week, with residents calling for the municipality governing them to be dissolved.
Another day, another disgruntled South African community, and another service delivery protest against the government. Residents here want the Western Area Municipality, which is tasked with providing them with basic services such as sanitation, water and electricity to be put under administration. They are accusing the mayor and other municipal officials of alleged corruption and financial mismanagement, and say the municipality no longer has the capacity to govern their community. People here, particularly the youth, say they've had enough of what they call government's empty promises and are threatening to take the law into their own hands if their demands are not met.
These residents who are living here in Simunye and Pegestal are furious. So that is why they are angry all in all. So they are going to fight until the end.
We're going to ban the municipality if they doesn't respond. If they doesn't take the mayor down.
The Premier of South Africa's Gauteng province said the police would work hard to restore peace and stability in the area.
Nothing beyond this must now be tolerated. We all have to work towards finding a solution.
She said the streets of Bekkersdal and Simunye, which are still strewn with rocks and other debris, would be saturated with police officers on the ground. Renee Dalkam, CCTV, Bekkersdal, west of Johannesburg.
In other news across the continent, Nigeria's military said on Friday it had killed 95 suspected Boko Haram fighters in raids in the country's northeast. Gunmen from the Islamist group had been battling security forces in a neighboring area. The army, which is striving to crush a 4-year Islamist uprising in Nigeria, said it deployed bombs and ground troops to destroy insurgent camps in Borno on Thursday. Spokesman General Ibrahim Atahiru said in a statement published late Friday that 70 suspected Islamists were killed in Borno State and others fled towards Damaturu, while 25 more were killed by the army. Meanwhile, violence is also breaking out all over the Central African Republic since Muslim Seleka rebels ousted President Francois Bozize in March. Lawlessness has led to a descent into chaos across the country. Many have been displaced and are in dire need of humanitarian assistance. The coup was the latest to trigger social strife in the country that remains one of the world's poorest, despite abundant gold and uranium deposits. United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has called on the organization's Security Council to dispatch a peacekeeping force to help stabilize the country. Elsewhere, leaders from the Economic Community of West African States have been meeting in Dakar, Senegal. The extraordinary session focused on the region's economy and also the political and security crisis in the sub-region, especially in Mali and Guinea-Bissau. ECOWAS requested assistance from the international community for northern Mali, where terrorists and extremist groups are regrouping and carrying out sporadic attacks. And finally, further north, Tunisia's ruling moderate Islamist party Ennahda and the opposition began talks on Friday to form a caretaker government after months of anti-government protests. The transitional cabinet will be tasked with preparing for elections and an agreement to end months of unrest in the country. The North African nation has been in turmoil since July, when the assassination of an opposition leader ignited protests that threatened to derail a democratic transition. Now, Zimbabwe is ready to commit troops to Mozambique should violence between government forces and former rebel group Renamo escalate. Renewed hostilities have broken out in Mozambique, prompting Renamo to declare that a peace deal signed in 1992 was over. Zimbabwe, which played a key military role in bringing about the peace accord, says it is closely monitoring developments. Farai Mwakutuya spoke to Zimbabwe's Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Honorable Minister, the situation, the developments in Mozambique, are they a cause for concern to Zimbabwe?
We are neighbors, but more important, Mozambique is vital for Zimbabwe's access to the global markets. The port of Beira is a principal means, or it's an artery of our global commerce. So we really would want to have total peace in Mozambique so that the country can continue to on the trajectory of development which has been the hallmark of Mozambique in recent years.
What action, if any, is the Zimbabwean government ready to take or make in this situation?
We only mean well for our Mozambican brothers. We do hope that they find peace and stability among themselves. But our sincere appeal is to Rakama never to entertain the idea of sustained violence. The region, SADC, will not accept that. We could only accept violence when it was the struggle against apartheid, against Rhodesian racism, against Portuguese colonialism. Now we are brothers. We will not accept that. There is nobody who will give succor to the sort of things which Rakama is trying to do.
Would military engagement be an option that Zimbabwe is willing to make?
We always work within the context of SADC, but more important, we work within Mozambique is a sovereign state. They have a government properly elected, which has been winning elections, and that is the Frelimo government. But the most important thing is Mozambicans, the sovereign people, should find an accommodation amongst each other. And then in the event they need help from SADC, we will always be there to help, any help which they request, whichever Zimbabwe is ready to consider. And that may include, if need be, our re-engagement at a military level in Mozambique. But we hope that it never gets to that. We hope that, we sincerely hope that they go back to the Rome Peace Accords and find peace among themselves.
Let's take another break here on Africa Live coming up. Triumph over Violence, a special series on Nigeria, looks at the resilience of Damaturu residents.
They tried to kill us. They said, before killing the soldier who have the gun, we have to kill the journalist who works Radio Mogadishu.
You cannot assure that the place you have gone or you have left this morning will be safe for you to return.
Nobody has been so far successfully prosecuted for killing a journalist.
In Somalia, not everybody can become a journalist, because sometimes it's even more dangerous than to become a soldier.
I chose to work as a journalist because it is my favorite job.
A CCTV team is on a groundbreaking assignment in Nigeria, the road into the Boko Haram badlands. In this latest report, the team is in Damaturu in the far northeast. Residents there are determined to triumph over the violence, but the city has paid a terrible price. Robert Nagila filed this exclusive story.
A grim reminder of a painful chapter in Nigeria's recent history. It's almost 2 years ago now, but to those who were there, the terror is still fresh.
I always tag it as a dark moment of our lives here in Damaturu.
On the evening of November 4th, 2011, more than 200 gunmen belonging to Islamist group Boko Haram stormed the city, blocked all 4 exits and began the killing. Churches were a favorite target. Around 10 were burned, St. Mary's among them.
We all ran away to a kind of hide somewhere, and they came early morning to see the church burning. I looked straight into the church, and I just looked at the tabernacle. I shedded tears. It took everybody by surprise because there was no room of what really happened. Gunshots and the bomb blasts at that time, many of us have never experienced that.
By the time the military retook control, about 150 people were dead.
It was after the attack on St. Mary's Parish and other churches across the country that the Nigerian government began providing security for all places of worship.
It really shook people, it put fear in the people, and people asked a lot of questions as to what is happening in our country, Nigeria.
The story of Damaturu since then has been one of a city of 45,000 that's under siege. of closed business, of roadblocks, and of more attacks, particularly on the young. Talk to the people here, and many will tell you they believe the tide is turning. But of all the people we spoke to, only Father James John dared to go on camera. Robert Nagila, CCTV, Damaturu, Nigeria.
To South Africa now, where a rather strange mystery stretching back nearly half a century has finally been solved. The world's first heart transplant was performed in South Africa. For the surgeon, Chris Bernard, it meant instant celebrity status, but he lost something along the way. CCTV's Travis Andrews has the story.
It was a night that opened up new frontiers in medicine, depicted here in lifelike detail at the heart of Cape Town Museum. On the 3rd of December 1967, local cardiac surgeon Chris Barnard gave a healthy heart to a dying man. The patient survived 18 days before succumbing to pneumonia. But for medicine, it was a turning point. For Barnard, too. What happened that night in this room catapulted Chris Barnard to international fame. And one nurse was desperate for a little memento. Renee Bates was a young nursing student at the hospital. And while Barnard enjoyed the headlines, she and a friend helped themselves to his boots. She's now finally returned them.
I know that if I had tried to auction them in the United States or anywhere else in the world, I would have probably got a lot of money for it, but that wasn't the intention. It was really just a naughty prank of a teenager. I had absolutely no idea there would be such a fuss about bringing the boots back.
The museum is certainly glad to have the boots back. Officials say there's been a sudden increase in visitors and say that shows the abiding fascination for Chris Barnard, 12 years after his death.
At that point, everything of Chris Barnard was a wonderful momentum to have. I mean, and that's why they took the boots. And he was so famous at that point in time. I know that some of the people, some of the patients still have chocolates which he gave them. So they kept everything that he touched or which belonged to him.
The boots may look a little ragged now, but the man who once wore them remains a star. Travis Andrews, CCTV, Cape Town.
Poliomyelitis is a highly infectious disease caused by the poliovirus. It causes paralysis and can even result in death. As the world marked World Poliomyelitis Day here in Nairobi, Kenya's Ministry of Health, UNICEF and other key partners addressed the media detailing a polio eradication initiative. CCTV's Maria Galang has more details.
Polio numbers have been on the decline over the years worldwide. Recently, however, the numbers seem to be on the rise again. 301 cases reported this year alone, with Kenya and Somalia accounting for 70% of polio cases worldwide. In a move to stop all polio cases nationwide by 2014, Kenya's government has come up with a strategy which includes routine immunization campaigns throughout the country. This, they hope, will eradicate the highly infectious condition. This will not be an easy task. Along the borders, the disease spreads fast amongst nomadic pastoralists. The government says it is difficult to reach out and give the required vaccinations to all the people in need.
So with the nomadic community, they are moving from this area to another place looking for pastures. Their priority is not for vaccination. So basically what we are trying to do with the government and the counties is to try and make sure that we build some health facilities in those areas.
Another major challenge is insecurity, which hinders efforts by local health workers.
Here we usually have people fighting between clans, and also we have insecurity because of Al-Shabaab. So when we have insecurity issues, even if the health workers are planning to go and vaccinate children in some certain villages, they always fear because of their security.
So far, there is no cure for polio, and children under the age of 5 are at high risk. But with proper multiple vaccinations, a child is protected for life. Maria Galang, CCTV, Nairobi.
A story of self-help now from one of Kenya's poorest communities. Many people in the country burn wood or kerosene for fuel. Now a group of women have found a far cheaper way to cook and a way to support their families. CCTV's Kofam Ranger has that story.
One of the biggest slums in Africa. But the people in Kibera are known for their resilience and resourcefulness. And these women are leading from the front. They transform what normally would be waste into good money. The recipe is simple. Charcoal dust mixed with soil and water, molded and left in the sun to dry.
When we started, we did not have any plans to sell them. They were just for domestic use. But then people started asking whether we can sell to them, and we thought, why not?
We sell mainly to hotels because they feel charcoal is much expensive. When they come here, then we know we will make good money that day.
One briquette sells for around 4 American cents. And the more they sell, the more they make.
If I make about 100 briquet, that means I will make about 300 shillings cash money, because mostly charcoal does not sell much here, so it depends with your strength.
There are benefits for the buyers too. Research shows that to prepare a standard meal for a family of 5 using kerosene would cost about 45 Kenya shillings, which is more than $50. But to prepare the same meal using the charcoal briquettes would cost about 3 Kenya shillings, which is $0.1 of a dollar. Now that saves families money, which they can use on other basic commodities. The project is the brainchild of an environmental group. Scientist Mary Njenga says it could help conserve Kenyan forests.
We are able to produce over 15% of fuel from the charcoal dust. An additional fuel is brought in through charcoal briquettes. And that means the trees that would have been saved to produce that 15% of fuel, according to the demand, is saved.
It's a simple idea, but it works. And in Kibera, it's catching on. Kofam Ranger, CCTV, Kibera, Kenya.
Well, let's leave it there for now. Stay in touch with us. Our Twitter handle is CCTV News Africa and our Facebook page CCTV Africa. I'm Penina Karibe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.